mental health worker going to say to someone that's going to make him drop that machete?
Yeah.
Well, no.
We don't. That's right. We do not know the full facts of what happened on that evening.
Absolute tragedy.
No.
And we're operating therefore in a vacuum.
Yeah, but it's interesting to talk about how the police handle these things generally.
Yeah.
We were talking with Tommy Wilson from the Tattooinga Whānau Trust about begging yesterday, and there was a meeting scheduled in Tauranga today about a rahui on begging to separate out the genuinely homeless and needy from the so-called professional beggars trying to ingratiate themselves with gangs, get a patch or supplement their incomes. Do you think that's a good idea?
I do. I was shocked to hear what Tommy Wilson said yesterday on the panel.
Yeah.
And it had never occurred to me that would have been the case, that they get in their cars and drive away. So yes, because the money isn't going to the people it should be going to.
No.
Yeah, there's been some concern that there are professional beggars, so-called, here in Wellington. Again, that comes down to resources, doesn't it? About having the people who can go and sort out the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah.
And then go give some assistance to those who are genuinely in need.
So much of it comes down to resources now, doesn't it? Hi, Jim. I will give people who beg food, says Rachel. However, the other week, the guy I was giving to asked for Vogel's bread, full cream milk and crunchy, not smooth peanut butter. I was a little taken aback, but I'd obliged. And when I came back from the shop, having bought these, he said, pop them there. I've just been given a roast chicken and bananas. This was in Grey Lynn in Auckland. But isn't that
clearly a good place to go if you're looking for
Isn't
a scratch
that
meal?
just the right outcome for a beggar, though? You
Yes.
get a really good selection
I've got to say that this has occurred. This has happened to me as well, because there are several. There are several psychiatric survivors, I think they're called, who frequent Ponsonby Road, and I will buy them a meal as well. And I've said, shall I go and get you, a really healthy salad over there? Nah, go over to Murder Burger, please, and get me the chips and the hamburger, and I'm happy to oblige.
Yeah, because you can understand how that might actually...
Because I understand how that might work.
Yeah. We've had a few conversations. I'll try and squeeze this in, although it'll be abridged. We had a few conversations this week about what you can and cannot say with regards to Israel Folau and Taika Waititi. Open racism and slurs are fine to post on Reddit, says its CEO. Racism permitted because people have different beliefs. On Reddit, the way in which we think about speech is to separate behaviour from beliefs, says Steve Huffman. That's the criterion. Say what you like, but you can't do what you like.
So it's all care and no responsibility.
All care and well. Reddit has 500 million monthly users. So you would think this severely impairs the current attempts to get rid of racist attitudes in society. But any thoughts about what he says? He's basically saying you've got to have a forum where people can say what they really want to say.
I think it's absolute hypocrisy.
Yes, and many people, I'm sure, will agree with you. What do you think, Janet?
I think he's walking a thin line. This idea of hate speech now is very, very popular, but actually it's a free speech issue. And people decry free speech, but free speech is the ability for people to say things that you don't want to hear.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, okay.
And to call them an arsehole if they are.
Yeah. The music is drowning us all out. Chris Wikaita, thank you very much for being on the panel today. And Janet Wilson. Thanks, Janet.
Pleasure.
That's us. We're back on Monday. Thanks, everybody. Here's Checkpoint.
Tō te maira e hoa mai he kōrero kei te haere he kaupapa kei te karawhiua. Tonight on Checkpoint, it is one of the most extraordinary photos to emerge from the Commonwealth Games. Sam Gaze giving his New Zealand teammate Anton Cooper the finger during the mountain bike event. Coming up, Gaze speaks to Joe Porter about winning gold and losing the plot. Also tonight, Donald Trump, who campaigned on getting the US out of the TPP and then did exactly that. Now, sidles back up to it again. 9,000 homes still without electricity in Auckland. Of the wait to be reconnected may extend to Tuesday or Wednesday. The weekend weather and the countdown to what US action against Syria. All of that and more coming up after the news with Katrina.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina bat in aho. The Wellington City Council hasn't ruled out reassessing buildings in the CBD after revelations a building evacuated yesterday afternoon had previously been deemed safe by two separate engineering firms. Up to 700 office workers were given 2 hours to leave the Bulcott Street building after a City Council engineer raised the alarm when he saw a report on internal cracks by the building owner's engineer. The Council's Chief Resilience Officer, Mike Mendonça, says it's worrying that two firms did not pick up on the severity of the cracks, which could have caused the building to collapse in an earthquake.
But it's too early to say exactly what's happened, and we don't quite understand that yet. We'll be working with the engineering fraternity and the ministry to make sure we do understand that, what's happened, and to see if there are any consequences for us beyond this particular building.
The Wellington City Council's Mike Mendonça. Tenants will have to wait until next week to find out whether they'll be able to re-enter the building. Margaret Wilson has just been named as the chair of the independent panel set up to resolve the impasse over nurses' pay. Professor Wilson is a former Labour government minister and a former New Zealand Law Commissioner. The other panel members will be Jeff Annals, a former chief executive of the Nurses Organisation, and Julie Patterson, a former chief executive of the Whanganui DHB. Nurses agreed to the panel process yesterday and it's set to begin work next week. Gold medalist mountain biker Sam Gaze says he deeply regrets accusing silver medalist and fellow New Zealander Anton Cooper of poor sportsmanship and says yesterday evening was one of the toughest of his life. Gaze suffered a puncture leading into the last lap of the Commonwealth Games race on the Gold Coast, forcing him to stop. Cooper passed Gaze, who then fought back to take gold. Gaze accused Cooper of being a poor sport for not stopping to help, but later apologised. He says the comments were petulant and not how he wants to be perceived as an athlete or a man.
Yesterday was a very tough situation for me. It was the first time in my life that I've really dealt with this amount of pressure. And in the heat of the moment I made a call or a gesture that was not what I would call manly. I'm regretfully sorry about what that caused and how it took away from what the really special performance that we did.
And Sam Gaze has been fined $280 by Cycling International's governing body for an abusive gesture he made at teammate Anton Cooper after being passed in the race. The police say they have no plans to implement body cameras despite questions being raised about another fatal shooting. Jerem Toms, who was 29, was fatally shot by police on State Highway 1 north of Puhoi 2 weeks ago. Family members say they'd called mental health services but were told to call the police for a welfare check. In the meantime, Mr Toms drove off and was ultimately pulled over and shot by the police. They say Mr Toms was wielding a machete and they'll not answer questions while this shooting is under investigation. Superintendent Chris Scarhill says they'll continue to monitor the use of body-worn cameras, but they have no plans to introduce them. Mr Scarhill says there are legal, privacy and other considerations that would have to be worked through. Vector says 9,000 Auckland customers are still without power and those living out west could be waiting until the middle of next week before their power is restored. Communities such as Piha have already had 3 nights without power or running water. Vector's chief executive Simon McKenzie says the damage has been extensive out west, where 2,500 kilometres of its network have been affected.
How real this proposed engagement is, we don't know. Similar things were said.
We have network running through a lot of those areas which goes through bush or, trees are in close proximity and those areas have had multiple trees uprooted and limbs from trees come down over the lines and basically rip the network down.
Simon McKenzie from Vector. Auckland Emergency Management says it's been delivering water and portaloos to communities in need of them today. It says it's also providing accommodation for people who need it, and anyone in need of assistance should ring their 0800 22 2200 number. It's 5:04. Sport. The New Zealand pole vaulter Eliza McCartney is on quest to claim her first Commonwealth Games medal when she competes in the final on the Gold Coast tonight. The Olympic bronze medalist says she's excited to compete on the world stage with 2 teammates beside her and admits it has given her a welcome confidence boost.
To have my teammates as such alongside me here, it just makes it more special, I think, for us. And you're not just out there by yourself, you know, you're out there with our coach and with other teammates, and I'll have Livy out there competing with me, which I've never had a New Zealander out there before. So all of those things are just awesome.
Eliza McCartney's final starts from 9:25 tonight. Also going for gold at the main stadium tonight is champion shot putter Dame Valerie Adams. She's the top qualifier for the final by more than a metre and will be attempting to scoop a 4th straight Commonwealth Games gold from 10:40 tonight. Meanwhile, the New Zealand boxer Troy Garton has won bronze in the women's 60-kilogram division, while men's javelin thrower Ben Langton-Burrell is through to that final. The Chiefs assistant coach Neil Barnes says the Hurricanes are the team to beat in the Super Rugby. The two New Zealand sides meet from 7:35 in Wellington tonight, and Barnes has high praise for the visitors.
They've got an outstanding team and they're playing some very good rugby too. So probably if you look across the country at the moment, you'd have to say they're one of the form teams at the moment. So they're the team to beat, which provides us with a good challenge. So looking forward to it.
Chiefs assistant coach Neil Barnes. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Country Life goes off-grid to visit a West Coast cattle farm powered by its own water wheel. Our Something for the Weekend will be members of the New Zealand Army Band. We're trying to persuade as many as possible into the studio to perform ahead of 2 gigs in the capital city. And because it's World Scrabble Day, we have a Sonic Tonic dedicated to words. Because talk is cheap. After the news at 7.
And on Lately at 10, we feature Kiwi Rules. The famous and the infamous introduce us to a new New Zealand artist. We'll have an eye not only on music, but books, people and politics, keeping you up to date with the world at the other end of the day and bringing you breaking news as it happens. That's Lately with Karen Hay, on Nights with Brian Crump on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, a few showers mainly tomorrow. Auckland to Waitomo, including Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Scattered showers turning to rain this evening, with heavy falls and thunderstorms easing from the south later tomorrow. Taranaki to Manawatu, including the central high country. Scattered rain spreading east this afternoon or evening and clearing from the south tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloud increasing this evening and scattered showers developing overnight. Horowhenua to Wellington, also Wairarapa, fine apart from cloud morning and night. Nelson and Marlborough, high cloud today, cloudy periods tomorrow with isolated showers. Bulla, mostly cloudy with a few showers today. Westland and Fiordland, fine with variable high cloud. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, long fine spells, however isolated showers, mainly about the coast. And the Chatham Islands, rain turning to showers this afternoon, some heavy with hail. It's almost 8 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten, and thank you everyone for being with us. Coming up, the TPP, will it be reborn in the USA? And 9,000 homes still without power in Auckland. But let's begin on the Gold Coast, where mountain biker Sam Gaze has been fined and forced to apologise for his bad sportsmanship less than 24 hours after winning gold at the Commonwealth Games. 22-year-old Gaze, who narrowly won gold over teammate Anton Cooper, it was an extraordinary race, has apologised for calling Cooper out and flipping the bird at him, for not stopping when he was getting a puncture fix. South African Alan Hatherley was right behind both riders in 3rd place. Cycling's governing body has fined Gaze for his hand gesture, or was a finger gesture really. Our sports reporter Joe Porter was at the mountain biking yesterday, and a short time ago Joe spoke with both Anton Cooper and Sam Gaze and began by asking Sam Gaze about his behaviour.
Yesterday was a very tough situation for me. It was the first time in my life that I've really dealt with this amount of pressure. Coming off the first World Cup and this, and you know, in the heat of the moment, I made a call or a gesture that was not, in my words, what I would call, you know, manly. And I'm regretfully sorry about what that caused and how it took away from what that really special performance that we did with the mountain bike race. And yeah, it's something I've had to face up to, and it's a great life lesson of, you know, what I need to do being a 22-year-old growing up in this world. And I'm not talking about, you know, going an inch faster on the bike. I'm talking about being a man, and that's what I had to. This is what I'm having to learn.
What did you say to Anton last night?
You know, it was a private conversation, and it was an apology that He deserved it, and I needed to have it before I made everything else right, you know. There's no hiding the fact Anton rode an incredible race yesterday. He's an incredible athlete, and, you know, he's got even incredible Palmares back at home. And so, yeah, I'm grateful that he's been so understanding about it.
And you gave him an unreserved apology?
Of course.
And how's your relationship moving forward? Do you think you can move on from this, of course?
Of course, you know, he understands that he's been really great with it, and he understands that I get a bit hot-headed sometimes, and that's something I've got to work on and make myself a better as a person before I make myself faster.
People make mistakes. It's how they learn from those that generally defines them as a man or a woman.
Yes, of course, and you know, it's a mistake that I've had to live with, and I'm looking forward to working through it. And I'm hoping that people can see the rationality behind the fact that I was a guy chasing my dream, and unfortunately I made a gesture that spoiled what I did on a bike today. But I'm proud. Even if people aren't proud of me wearing the silver fern, I'm proud to wear the silver fern, and I'm glad that I was able to put on a good result.
And obviously the road race now, so you can quickly move on.
I hope so. You know, it's very important for me, for my, you know, I was going to sleep better tonight, making sure that I, you know, right my wrongs. You know, this isn't who I am as a person, and I'm completely embarrassed of myself for how this betrayed me. And I feel like if I make sure that I get this right, then I'll be able to sleep better at night, and that's when I can start to perform again.
All right, Anton, so obviously a little bit of a shame to have the comments made last night distract from what was, or detract from a great result, Kiwi 1-2 in the mountain biking. I'm assuming you've accepted Sam's apology?
Well, yeah, it took the gloss off it a bit, but, you know, he came and apologised to me last night, and, I hope it's genuine and sincere. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, and we'll move forward. We're going to see a lot more of each other, so it's a lot easier to get along with each other than not. And we'll see the day as a day that was really successful for New Zealand mountain biking, and like Glasgow, it's put us on the map again as a mountain bike nation.
Well, how did you feel last night when you heard those comments of Sam's for the first time?
Well, I didn't realise what had actually really happened, and after the finish line I was a bit confused because I could obviously sense that something wasn't right, you know, and I was like, well, I had no ill feelings, so I was a bit confused by it. And then I saw, you know, photos and stuff coming out. I was like, oh, far out, well, whatever. But I couldn't change anything myself. You know, there's moments in the race where I'd go, well, actually, even when he had the stop, I didn't realise that it was a minor, like, CO2. I thought it was a full wheel change. And so when I was up the top of the hill, I was kind of like, you know, play it safe and just, like, nurse her home. And then suddenly I saw Sam, like, right back. So I figured it mustn't have been anything too time-consuming at that point. We both had moments where we had to claw our way back, whether it was chasing a 20-second gap back in the race or a seesaw at times. And he timed it really well at the end and caught me before the top of the last climb. And it was all, you know, racing, good quality racing, and it made for a great spectacle, I'm sure. It was just, like I said, it was a shame it took the shine off it, but the apology's been accepted, and we'll go on from here.
Obviously, everyone in the world can't get on, but what's your relationship like with Sam?
Oh, I mean, it's tough being competitors, and sport brings out the best and worst in people. It really does, and most people will never understand what it's like to be like a world-class athlete racing in front of thousands, or, you know, there's millions of people back home who have invested interest in how our athletes perform. And so it adds pressure to it, and it adds heat and hype. And so people kind of speak and do things in the spur of the moment, which, you don't want it to happen too often because it kind of will show someone's true colours. But, you know, let's hope his apology sincere. And like I said, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that it is. The problem is if it starts happening too often, then, you know, it's not. But I'm sure he'll have learnt the lesson. And we'll both move forward because that's what we need to do.
So it won't affect your relationship moving forward?
No, I'm quick to, you know, forgive and forget, and we'll both move forward, I'm sure, and we'll see each other at next World Cups, World Champs, and hopefully a couple medals more at Tokyo 2020.
Anton Cooper speaking a short time ago to our reporter Joe Porter, and before that Sam Gaze, of course, talking. We're going to bring Joe in now, who's joining us live via Live View from the Gold Coast. Boy, they were a couple of fascinating conversations, Joe. Tell us about that fine. What's that about, and whose fine is it?
Well, it's a fine that's been handed down to Sam Gaze from the UCI, who are the International Cycling's governing body, a $280 fine, and it's for the gesture, for flipping the bird, to put it euphemistically, after the line towards his teammates. So it's for the gesture rather than the comments, and it's a similar fine that was handed down to a rider called Jason Christie, who won the Nationals earlier this year in New Zealand and performed the same sort of act. So that's what the fine is for, and it's basically a slap on the hand for saying this is not what we do in this sport, and it is not a good show of sportsmanship.
Sam Gaze has another race tomorrow, Joe, not at the Commonwealth Games. And this is fascinating because of what's required of him, right?
That's right. So he's in the road race tomorrow with the New Zealand's men's road race cycling team. He's playing a bit role, so to speak. Jack Bauer is the lead rider within that New Zealand men's team, and they perform as a team and they try and get Jack into the best possible position near the end so that he can then fight for a medal. So Sam Gaze really quickly needs to put this behind him because it's been affecting his sleep last night, and as he mentioned to me, if he can right the wrongs of yesterday, it will hopefully give him a good sleep and therefore lead him to perform better in tomorrow's road race. So certainly a lot going on in his head. He's trying to grow as a man. He made a big mistake, but let's hope that he can move on from this and I guess come out tomorrow and prove why he deserves to be on this team and prove why he is a good teammate.
Joe, that is the events of the past couple of days, or the past day. Gosh, all of this has happened very fast. Let's look at today. Troy Garton won bronze in the 60 kilos women's boxing. And I think people had expected Troy would appear in the medals somewhere. Also expected to appear in the medals is Eliza McCartney and Dame Val, who are both on tonight, up tonight, aren't they?
Absolutely, another big night at the athletics track out at Carrara Stadium. Eliza McCartney, she used to be an underdog, but after her medal performance in Rio, she's certainly not here. She's a favourite to win gold and certainly medal in the pole vault, of course. And Dame Valerie Adams, well, a fantastic story. Like we mentioned yesterday, only 6 months after giving birth to her first child, she's back in the mix with all the top-class athletes. She threw the biggest throw in qualifying, and we're expecting another gold medal from her tonight. A little bit of extra pressure. Grant Robertson and the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern are going to be in the crowd at Carrara Stadium, so some big names supporting some big names out there, and it's going to be another big night on the athletics track and track and field for the New Zealand athletes. Another 2 medals, you'd almost say all but guaranteed.
Ooh, yeah, it's very exciting. I wonder if Dame Val even feels the pressure any longer. This will be her 4th gold if touch wood she wins it. It's going to be a very exciting night. Joe Porter, you're doing such great work for us over there. We really appreciate it. Lovely to talk to you and enjoy watching those women be quite extraordinary later on the Gold Coast. Joe Porter joining us live. We'll go back to the Commonwealth Games if anything develops while we're on air, but both Dame Val and Eliza McCartney are on later this evening. Let's turn to Auckland now, and its power cuts as a result of the storm on Tuesday night. Roughly 9,000 homes and businesses are still without power. It was as high as 180,000 immediately after the storm. So repair crews have restored power to more than 90% of the homes and businesses that lost it. In a moment, we'll hear from the CEO of Vector that some homes won't be back until next Tuesday or Wednesday, a week after falling trees cut them off. Emma Wild, who lives with her family in the suburb of Three Kings in Auckland, is about to enter her 4th night without power.
We've been told this afternoon by Vector that we might be on by tomorrow night at 10 o'clock.
Are they saying that pretty much every day? They just go, you might be on tomorrow.
Yeah, we keep getting a different number. And actually our number, funnily enough, has gone from being a really long number to being 159. So does that mean there are 159 of us only in Auckland without power? I don't know.
What's it been like not having power?
Cold.
What kinds of things are you struggling with?
Well, I mean, we're lucky. I mean, we're luckier than some people because we've got, we've got hot water. So we're able to bath and shower and use the camp stove. We've got teenage children that are enjoying it very much. So we're better off than other people that haven't got any fires, etc. But it's cold, it's miserable, and it's a bit weird sitting here when everybody else around you in your street and the opposite streets and the street lights are all on.
Right. So if you walk out onto your front deck at night and you stand here, literally do all your neighbours have their lights on?
It's all normal. Absolutely normal.
And you're sitting in your cold, dark house?
Yeah, that's right. It's great.
Does that weird for you being in your 2018, all your neighbours have power, you don't have power?
We're third world Auckland, aren't we? So yeah, the sooner we buy back our electricity companies, the better, I think.
Is it frustrating for you for that to happen?
I think as someone that's lived in New Zealand and loves it so much, I think the change over the last 20 years has been fantastic, but the oxymoronic side of it is the fact that the infrastructure clearly hasn't, so that needs to change.
If you were talking to the CEO of Vector, pretend I'm the CEO of Vector, what would you say to me?
why? Why is it taking so long? It's just ridiculous. You know, a couple of days, fine, but, you know, we have a city of, I don't know how many people, we've got a million or so people. There's building going on all over the place. And they bang on about, obviously they've got to look after the hospitals, etc. Obviously, but all those places have got generators. So why is it someone that's paying full rates in a residential area in central Auckland, sitting in their home when everybody else around them is just happily, merrily ticking along with no freaking power?
Do you get the AECT dividend yet?
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people have been saying, stuff the dividend. I don't appreciate
$320, really? Right. I mean, they've just lost that in food. You know, and just convenience. We've got to bring our cars out. We've got an electric door. I mean, it sounds like a third world problem, but we shouldn't really be having third world problems in a city this size.
Emma Wild speaking to our reporter Zach Fleming. Well, Simon Mackenzie is the CEO of Vector, the actual one, unlike Zach, he was just pretending to be him. And I spoke to Simon Mackenzie just over an hour ago, and we began with the tally of homes still without power.
The tally is basically out of the 180,000 customers that were impacted by the storm on Tuesday. We've restored 95% approximately of those customers, so we still have around about 9,000 customers, which also includes some that went out as a result of the weather over the last 24 hours.
Right, so you've lost a few after the winds of last night.
Yeah, there was probably about 2,000 that we had to restore after winds last night, so we're currently sitting around about 9,000 customers that are still out. Unfortunately, those customers are predominantly out in the west of Auckland, so the areas that really bore the brunt of the weather event. They saw, you know, probably winds up to 200k as we've seen, and they're in the high vegetation areas, so that is really the tough area for us to get back on.
Okay, and so when will they be back on? We're hearing possibly as late as Tuesday in some cases? That's
right. Look, the reality is with the crews out in those areas now, a lot of the network out into those regions is really challenging given it goes through bush and 20-30 kilometres out to Piha, for example, and the guys have got out there. We've had helicopters up in the air identifying as much of the damage as we can from the air, and then they get into the ground and they find more damage. So there will be some customers that may still be out as late as Tuesday or Wednesday, but we're certainly aiming to get the bulk of that 9,000 back on over the weekend.
Okay, so some as late as Tuesday or Wednesday. Do they know that yet? Have you managed to tell those customers? And we should point out that 9,000 customers isn't 9,000 people. Customers is a household, right, rather than a person. Do they know
That's right.
that it may be Tuesday or Wednesday?
Well, we're certainly communicating that through a number of radio channels and putting it on our website and doing as best we can to update all those customers. We've had people out in the field advising, for example, out in Piha that it may be extended time. So we're doing all we can to basically identify that those customers could be up for lengthy periods of times, and the information we're putting up on our website identifies the areas that may be impacted for longer periods.
Yeah, I'm just looking at your website and it says Piha will be this weekend, potentially as early as tomorrow. So that information's incorrect, isn't it?
No, the Piha is hoping to get that up and running. It's some other pockets. It's Titirangi, some parts of Dairy Flat, Kaukopakop are other ones where those might be more extended. But at this point in time, with regards to Piha, we're hoping to get that up as quickly as possible. That's an estimate, and as we say, we'll keep updating that.
Simon, I want to talk about undergrounding because you are right, 180,000 homes went out, homes and businesses. You are now back at about 9,000, so it has been a very quick restoration project. But this issue wouldn't be anywhere near as great if more lines were underground, right? And it looks like you haven't spent terribly much money on that in the past decade.
Well, I think there's two things, John, is some areas just can't be undergrounded. I mean, the reality is, for example, getting an overhead line out to Piha through the bush is just not practical. Undergrounding is a very expensive exercise that doesn't necessarily solve problems. unfortunately, as you saw through the Christchurch earthquake, they had a lot of underground network, and in an earthquake event, they that takes a very long time to repair. So undergrounding is not the best solution. Now, with regards to, we have continued to do undergrounding. There are regulatory requirements around what we building networks, and where we have good existing network, then there's no reason why that can't stay up. The biggest issue here really comes down to, from my perspective, is there's a lot of trees across Auckland, and in some parts of Auckland where you have a lot of trees, you can't necessarily underground down the street because you cut through the root systems. In other parts of Auckland, just basically trying to underground through volcanic rock is unbelievably challenging. So this is something that we'll have to look at with council and customers to say, well, what are the options? But I'd just say that undergrounding is not a silver bullet, and we have outages. We've got 55% of our network is underground, and in those areas we have outages, and they typically take a long time to repair, where people dig into cables, and those cables have to be located.
Right, let's talk about those. Sorry, Simon, to interrupt, but can we talk about those underground areas in the events of the past few days? Yep. Were those underground areas impacted by the storm this week?
No, they weren't. In some parts of the city they weren't, but they may have had some impacts because some of the overhead network might have actually then transitioned from overhead into underground to supply those areas.
So the underground was sound, right? So the underground infrastructure was sound. And the issue is that you, or Vector, have paid out $1.7 billion in dividends over the last 12 years and spent only about 10% of that sum on undergrounding during that period. In other words, you seem to have prioritised dividend payment over weatherproofing, infrastructure spend that would protect Auckland against such events when storms strike.
Oh no, I don't think. I think there's, there's a different context you're talking about, John. As a business, obviously we've paid dividend, and that's gone back to mainly to the people of Auckland. So as people know, that they get a cheque every year for around about $340, which is part of paying a dividend as a commercial enterprise. What we're talking about here is an extreme event that came through at hurricane force winds that basically uprooted trees and basically pulled down some of our lines.
And we're going to see more of that, aren't we? I mean, the problem is that all of the modelling suggests that we're going to get more such storms in Auckland. What are you saying? Are you saying that every time a strong wind hits the city, somewhere in the region of 180,000 homes might be impacted by that? Is there nothing more Vector can do?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that obviously we're looking at, we've done a lot of modelling with regards to the potential impacts from climate change. What we do observe through climate change is that these types of events could be more frequent. I think that's reasonably well accepted now. And, right across New Zealand, that's something that have to be looked at. It's not like Auckland is the only network in New Zealand that has overhead assets, which is, in fact, I think we have one of the highest percentages of undergrounding. That's no comfort to customers, obviously, without power. What we're looking at is how can we have the conversation about, is there more that we could do with councils, with regulators, to think about how the tree management actually get managed, because a lot of these trees that have come down have been from 20, 30 metres away. Where does it make sense to underground? Obviously we'll look at that, but I'd just like to also say that undergrounding also comes at a very high cost. When we think about undergrounding, it can be 5 to 6 times more expensive than an overhead network, and the balance that we're always trying to make with regards to customers and also with regulators is what's the right balance, because when everything's going fine, people don't like high power bills, so it's a judgment, it's a delicate issue.
Yes, it is. It certainly is. But people want power first and foremost, don't they? And they also want clarity too when the power's out. And I'm just looking at your website. You were talking about Dairy Flat and Kaupapa. Well, you were saying they're going to be back on Tuesday or Wednesday. Your website is still saying tomorrow night, which is really confusing and frustrating. Who's right?
Yeah, what we're saying is some pockets of people in those areas may still be out. This is, and I totally agree that the information has been a challenge. It's still very difficult for us to give exact times. What we're wanting to say is people should prepare. Some people, pockets of those areas could still be problematic later into early next week.
Simon McKenzie talking to us a short time ago. Sorry about the glitch in that. We don't think that was a power surge or anything going wrong, but we lost the picture. However, we still had the audio. Thank you, Jeremy. It is 5:30 in about 8 seconds, but let's listen to the sting. You are with Checkpoint on RNZ. Coming up, US President Donald Trump looks to have done a U-turn on the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal. The Wellington City Council isn't ruling out reassessing buildings in the CBD after revelations a building deemed safe was later determined not to be, and an Australian woman is lost overboard after falling from a P&O cruise ship in rough seas near New Caledonia. Lots coming up between now and 6:30 on a Friday night. We'd love your feedback. You can text us 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. We're hearing from people in Piha who are reminding us that no power means no water out there, out on the west coast. And we are, of course, on Facebook and Twitter and you name it. Katrina Ben, if I talk for another 16 seconds, it won't be 5:30. I just feel like we shouldn't break the habit of a lifetime by being on time.
No, we should. It's Friday. Let's go on time.
Ladies and gentlemen, Katrina Batten.
The Wellington City Council says it's worrying 2 engineering firms didn't pick up on cracks that could have caused a building in the CBD to collapse in an earthquake. Some 700 tenants were evacuated from a Bulcott Street building yesterday when a report on cracks in the building emerged. The council's Mike Mendonça says it's working with the engineering fraternity to work out its response. Tenants will have to wait till next week to find out whether they can go back in. The government has named Margaret Wilson to chair an independent panel over nurses' pay. Professor Wilson is a former Labour government minister and a former law commissioner. A former chief executive of the nurses' organisation and a former CEO of the Whanganui DHB are also on the panel. The nurses agreed to the panel process yesterday and the panel will start work next week. Gold medalist mountain biker Sam Gaze has apologised for accusing fellow Kiwi Anton Cooper of poor sportsmanship after Gaze got a puncture before the last lap of the race. Cooper passed Gaze, who then fought back to take gold. Gaze accused Cooper of being a poor sport for not stopping to help. He says the comments were petulant and not how he wants to be perceived as an athlete or a man. Gaze has been fined $280 for an abusive gesture at his teammate. Auckland Emergency Management has been delivering water and portaloos to some of the 9,000 Aucklanders still without power after this week's storm. Vector says customers living out west could be waiting until mid-next week before their power is restored. Some communities have already had 3 nights without power or running water, and Vector says the damage has been extensive out west. Anyone needing help should ring 0800 22 22 00. It is, those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6 o'clock.
Well, you're just completely thrown by them being so early, weren't you?
Well, I was.
Sorry, Katrina.
Yeah, it's all your fault, John.
Yeah, it is. The 5:30 headlines are very seldom at 5:30, but they were tonight, and we utterly caught Katrina out. It's you there, Emile Donovan. We haven't caught you out too, have you? This is going to be a domino effect of people being caught out. Now, Emile is in situ in Wellington, and Emile Donovan, our business reporter, rumours are swirling around Fletcher Building like a hot, dry Canterbury nor'wester.
That's right, John. These are reports, and we must emphasise they are just reports at the moment. They're coming out of the Sydney Morning Herald, but they are reports that the Australian company Wesfarmers, they own Bunnings, has bought 3 or 4% of the embattled Fletcher Building. Now, they're citing anonymous sources close to Wesfarmers. This actually does make sense on a whole lot of levels, really. Fletcher Building, of course, has gone through a pretty torrid time. Their share price has dropped by about a third over the past year after they lost around about $1 billion on some big construction projects. And there has been speculation that they're going to have to raise some cash to boost their financial situation. Complementing that, Wesfarmers is said to be sitting or about to sit on a big pile of cash as well, because it's trying to get rid of one of its assets, the Australian supermarket chain Coles. So, you know, it's one of those awkward situations where we don't really know what's happening exactly, but there are a whole lot of rumours swirling around. Now, a spokesperson for Fletcher's has said that they're not aware of Wesfarmers buying any shares in the company yet, and Wesfarmers don't actually have to tell anyone until such a time as they've bought 5% of the company or more. But one thing that we can say, pretty much the only concrete thing that we can say, is that Fletcher's share price has shot up today. It's gone up by about 8.5% after being as high as sort of 11% earlier on today. So there is, well, I mean, read into that what you will, really.
Yeah. It's that old adage, is it? Someone will tell me I know I'm wrong, but it's something along the lines of buy on the rumour, sell on the fact, isn't it? Someone will text in. Growth forecasts have been slashed. This is odd. I don't really understand this, but the government's growth policies are getting the blame, Emil. Yeah,
I mean, look, this is a relative. The pedants again will probably have a go at me, but this is quite a nice example of irony. It seems the economic forecaster Infometrics has lowered its growth forecasts for this year from about 3% to about 2.4%. And to just 2% for next year. Now, what they're saying is the new government is taking its spending in a different direction to try to grow the economy, and there is going to be a lag as that picks up. Taking transport as an example, the Labour League government's focused on public transport and rail still have to go through the design and planning phase, so they can't just start pumping infrastructure money into it straight away. Think of it kind of like a great big ship, a dreadnought, that's barreling through the sea, full speed ahead, but you want to turn it around 180 degrees. It's not as simple as slamming on the handbrake on the race course and spinning around. The ship has to take a while to turn around and get back up to full speed. So some pretty interesting stuff there. Falling immigration is also adding to that, as well as an ageing population and, of course, a government that doesn't actually have a lot of spare cash lying around for stimulatory kind of policies.
Thanks, Emil. How did the markets end the week?
Well, the NZX 50, they were up marginally. It was at up 10.5%. That's 0.12. Sorry, 10.5 points. That's 0.12%. It closed on 8414. The dollar is steady against the main currencies, down slightly against the Australian dollar. It's buying 73.7 US cents, 94.8 Australian, and 51.8 pence.
Emil Donovan, we've enjoyed your company this week. Thank you very much indeed, and have a great weekend. What is the weekend going to be like on the weather front? Let's find out by going to the Met Service, where we're joined again by meteorologist John Law. Kia ora, John.
Kia ora. As we head in towards the weekend, for Saturday we are going to start off with a fair bit of wet weather across the northern parts of the country. So for Auckland and across towards the Coromandel and even those northern parts of Waikato and the western parts of the Bay of Plenty, it's a wet start with spells of rain, one or two heavier falls to watch out for there as well, and perhaps even the odd rumble of thunder. It does get better as we head towards the evening time. That rain is shifting a bit further northwards, but generally a few showers to watch out for across much of the North Island, but an improving story. Some of the best weather for the North Island, at least down on the far south, in through Wellington up towards the carpeted coast, generally staying dry. Some nice spells of sunshine. Temperatures though, 14 degrees Celsius in Wellington, and across in towards the likes of Masterton, 13 or so. A few showers around the places such as Gisborne and down towards Hawke's Bay, but with some brighter weather as we go through towards the end of the day. For Canterbury, a isolated shower or two around the likes of Banks Peninsula and around the eastern coast, but most spots staying dry. But we are still going to find it's a cold start day, especially in places such as central Otago. Temperatures back down to -1 degree Celsius for Queenstown to start the day, but a fine looking day down in the far south for Otago and for Southern. Plenty of dry and sunny conditions. Temperatures 12 to about 14 degrees Celsius. A touch more clouds returning to that western coast later on the day on Saturday. And that's it from me.
Thank you, John. Have a great weekend. Invercargill, you are in for the most beautiful day tomorrow. It's going to start cold, but it's going to be blue skies all day and get up to about 14 degrees. Gorgeous in Southland on a day like that. Facing a growing backlash over a looming trade war with China, President Donald Trump seems to have done a U-turn on the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal. Originally, the TPP involved 12 countries, including the US, and was conceived under former President Barack Obama as a way to counter China's surging power in the Asia-Pacific region. With great nationalist fanfare, President Trump yanked America out of the trade pact, which he'd promised to do, and he did do, which was finally signed by 11 countries, including New Zealand, but not including the US. Now the US president is suggesting one way to get China's attention would be to do more business with other Pacific nations. You guessed it, as in the members of the TPP. Confused? Well, our political editor Jane Patterson isn't.
The Trans-Pacific Partnership is another disaster, done and pushed by special interests who want to rape our country, just a continuing rape of our country. That's what it is, too. It's a harsh word. It's a rape of our country. This is done by wealthy people that want to take
Donald Trump pulling no punches on the campaign trail in 2016, and he withdrew the US from the deal in one of his first acts as president. But now he's coming under pressure from politicians in his own party, representing states who supported him in his presidential bid. Nebraska's Republican Congressman Don Bacon delivered a blunt message to Mr. Trump.
The farm prices are half what they were in 2014, and that we can't take much more of a beating for many of these farms go under. So we need to move forward fastly on trade and get this agriculture economy moving up again.
Republican Senator Ben Sasse, who was also at the meeting, said there had been progress.
The big headline coming out of this meeting is that the president said he was deputizing Larry Kudlow and Ambassador Lighthizer to look at re-entering the TPP negotiations. The president multiple times reaffirmed in general to all of us and looked right at Larry Kudlow and said, Larry, go get it done.
The Trade Minister David Parker says the move is not something New Zealand would ignore.
Of course, the United States is the largest economy in the world, and it's one of the two superpowers alongside China, so their comments are of interest to us. How real this proposed engagement is, we don't know. Some of the things were said at Davos. The American system is very complex, and the administration has many parts. And not all parts of them have the same view, so we're not sure where this ends.
Former trade negotiator Charles Finney says if Mr. Trump is serious, it would be a good thing for New Zealand. He says Donald Trump is facing new pressures as the row between the US and China over tariffs escalates.
The Chinese have been very clever in targeting products that would really hurt some of the key Trump support states should they go ahead with this proposed tariff increase in the United States. So he's under pressure, and this is quite a convenient way of relieving that pressure for a while.
But Mr. Finney believes any renegotiation of the TPP would not be easy.
Because we've got a signed agreement, everyone knows what's in it, and it will just be so much more difficult for any new party to demand major changes. And if there were to be major changes, there'd have to be quite a good price paid for that.
Former Trade Minister Todd McClay says Mr. Trump would want a lot more than was in the original TPP, which is why he withdrew the US in the first place. He says even though in principle a deal for New Zealand would be advantageous, it would be hard to accept new demands.
The renegotiated deal, the strategy was to hold back things America really wanted, but keep the market access there so that, US exporters were missing out. If Mr. Trump now is saying he's interested in re-engaging on the TPP, it tells me the strategy New Zealand put in place is working, but it would always be a very difficult negotiation.
Executive Director of the International Business Forum, Stephen Jacoby, says while he's not opposed to the idea of the US returning to the deal, there would be major challenges. He says the sticking point for the US had been intellectual property provisions.
Patent terms, protections for pharmaceuticals and better access for US medicines and drugs and things like that, that everybody finds rather complicated to deal with. So there wasn't a lot of objection when those things were removed. But it was this chapter, the IP chapter, that was not acceptable to the US Congress, which was why President Obama couldn't move forward.
New Zealand signed the revised deal in Chile last month and aims to ratify it by the end of the year. The deal will come into effect once it's been ratified by at least half of the member countries. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
Jane's in Parliament. Let's stay in Wellington, where the City Council isn't ruling out reassessing buildings in the CBD after revelations that a building evacuated yesterday had previously been deemed safe by two separate engineering firms. Up to 700 office workers were given 2 hours to leave the Bulcott Street building, less than 24 hours after they were assured it was safe. What's all of this mean? Well, Katie Scotch has been asking that question.
79 Bulcott Street had been inspected by ISPS consulting engineers and New Zealand consulting engineers following the Kaikoura quake and was not on the City Council's earthquake-prone list. Despite this, the building's owner commissioned New Zealand consulting engineers to carry out another assessment on the building late last year. An engineer identified cracks in the shape of large spiderwebs on the floor and ceiling around internal pillars. Alarm bells were raised when the building's owners applied to the City Council for consent to undertake repair work. Yesterday it deemed the 13-storey building unsafe and ordered the evacuation. The Council's Chief Resilience Officer, Mike Mendonça, says it's worrying two firms inspected the building and did not pick up on the severity of the cracks, which could have caused the building to collapse in an earthquake.
Of course it's a concern. That's why we worked closely with the building owner to make sure the building was unoccupied as of 4 o'clock yesterday. But it's too early to say exactly what's happened, and we don't quite understand that yet. We'll be working with the engineering fraternity and the ministry to make sure we do understand that, what's happened, and to see if there are any consequences for us beyond this particular building.
In an email to tenants obtained by RNZ dated April 5th, a senior structural engineer from New Zealand Consulting Engineers, which undertook the inspections, explicitly told the property manager they had assessed the building and it was safe to occupy. The alarm was raised by the council after one of its engineers saw the report on the cracks by the building owner's engineer. Mr Mendonça says it's unclear how long the building has been unsafe. Paul Campbell from the Structural Engineering Society of New Zealand says there are two levels of inspection, rapid or highly detailed.
If it was the latter, a rapid inspection, that's visual, it's non-intrusive, it doesn't involve taking wall linings off, carpet tiles up, lifting ceiling panels, etc. So you can only see what you can only see. So it is conceivable, depending on the level of inspection, that things weren't obviously visible.
The building manager, Melissa McGee, says she doesn't find it concerning two firms missed the cracks.
Issues were identified. It was just a matter of whether they were a risk to the safety of people in the building. And obviously, as more information has come to light, that changes the situation on an ongoing basis. So no, I'm not laying the blame anywhere, and we're just trying to work through it now, and currently the tenants are my priority.
Melissa McGee is confident tenants will be able to re-enter the building. Chris Roberts from tourism industry Aotearoa is one of those tenants. He says they were lucky they could temporarily relocate nearby.
We're very fortunate that one of our strategic partners, Service IQ, have offices right across the road. So we've moved over there. We're set up, connected and back into business already. So no great interruption as far as the business is concerned.
RNZ contacted the engineers who said the building was safe to occupy, but has not had a response. Tenants will have to wait until next week to find out whether they'll be able to re-enter the building. In Wellington for Checkpoint, ko Katie Scotcher Tēnei.
13 minutes to 6. Jerem Toms's family will remember him not as the 29-year-old shot dead by the police, but as a jokester and an incredibly generous man. The Auckland man was killed last month after he allegedly threatened officers with a machete when his car was road spiked north of Puhoi, which is just north of the Auckland motorway system. His family have now spoken out, saying they have more questions than answers about the death of Mr Toms, whose girlfriend is due to give birth any day now. They want to know if the police who shot him knew he was mentally unwell. Our reporter Sally Murphy spoke to the Chief Executive of the Mental Health Foundation, Sean Robinson, about the case.
Well, I think this is part of the wider issue of the number of mental health issues that police are being called out to deal with, and whether they're actually equipped and trained to be able to respond appropriately to those call-outs. We know, and the police are very aware, that the volume of mental health-related call-outs that they've been dealing with, suicide-related call-outs, have gone up very significantly, over a third in the last 5 years, and it's becoming a key part of the work of the police, and yet the police are not a mental health responding service. They have a small role to play, but they're not a mental health service.
Do you think everyday officers get enough training to deal with mental health issues?
No, I don't think they do, and I think that the police would acknowledge this. They are an organisation that's designed to deal with crime, not to deal with mental health issues, and I think what is partly happening for the police is the volume of need in the community around mental health issues is so huge, and we know that in many cases people are not getting support early enough, and so often people are reaching points of real distress when they're kind of acting out that mental and emotional pain or confusion from their mental health problems, and that then appears as a problem that the police need to be called out to. So if we could get services and support to people far earlier, prevent a lot of these what appear to be crisis situations emerging, then that would take the load off the police. And if we had more appropriate crisis response resources in the response to mental health issues, then again that would be much better for people that are in crisis and much better for the police.
It's Sean Robinson from the Mental Health Foundation speaking to Sally Murphy. The police say mental health training is currently being refreshed to ensure they are providing practical operational training for staff. Let's go back to Donald Trump, who's been speaking to the leaders of Britain and France to discuss possible military action in response to the chemical attack in Syria. A British statement said Mr Trump and the British Prime Minister Theresa May had agreed that it was vital chemical attacks did not go unchallenged. But back in Washington, the president was dialing the rhetoric back, well, a little, after yesterday's taunting of Syria's ally Russia by tweeting it should get ready because missiles were coming. Today, the president tweeted that an American military strike could come very soon or not so soon at all. But as the BBC's John Sopel reports from Washington, the US military is clearly gearing up for action of some kind.
Weapons locked and loaded, sailors ready for action, US carrier battle group left its home port in Norfolk, Virginia. Destination, the Eastern Mediterranean, still 5,000 miles away. And the senior officer awaiting orders to act from the president.
I'm so pleased and proud of the Harry S. Truman Carrier Strike Group team, 6,500 of the finest Americans you could ever sail with or serve with. We're trained, we're ready, any mission, anytime, anywhere, we're ready to go.
And though this powerful flotilla might be full steam ahead, you get the sense in Washington of rowing back. From the Commander-in-Chief today, the talk was a lot less bellicose. No more a big price to pay, no more decisions in 24 to 48 hours, no more nice, new and smart missiles raining down. Instead, this.
We're looking very, very seriously, very closely at that whole situation, and we'll see what happens, folks. We'll see what happens. It's too bad that the world puts us in a position like that.
And from the Defence Secretary, an insistence that no decisions to strike had been taken. All options were on the table. And what sounded like uncertainty over who was responsible for the attack.
I believe there was a chemical attack, and we're looking for the actual evidence. The OPCW, this is the Organization for the Chemical Weapons Convention. We're trying to get those inspectors in probably within the week.
But the Allies are not speaking with one voice. Listen to how much more definitive the French president is.
We have proof that last week, now nearly 10 days ago, that chemical weapons were used, at least chlorine, and that they were used by Bashar al-Assad's regime.
US action a year ago amounted to little more than cratering a runway. It's still likely that this time multinational action will be more extensive and will come sooner rather than later. But with chemical weapons inspectors due to arrive in Duma at the weekend, the window for a quick response would appear to be closing fast. The Russians, though, still insist there's no justification for any action.
Washington continues to make militaristic statements that risk causing a dangerous escalation. There are accusations not only against Damascus, but also against the Russian Federation.
Donald Trump tweeted this morning that a military strike may come soon, or maybe not so soon. Now, if you're being generous, you could say this is the fog of war, keep the enemy guessing. Or it may be that there is still some confusion and indecision over what to do next.
The BBC's John Sopel reporting from Washington. Just to raise the temperature a little bit further, at UN headquarters in New York today, the Russian ambassador warned that US airstrikes in Syria could spark a war between Moscow and Washington. It's coming up to 6 minutes to 6. You're with Checkpoint on Friday night, and thank you for being with us. Police will meet a P&O cruise ship when it docks in Brisbane tomorrow after a woman fell overboard about 300k west of New Caledonia. The Pacific Dawn was sailing through rough seas when the woman was seen falling from the ship. A search was mounted but was unsuccessful. Elizabeth Brown reports.
The man overboard announcement went out over the ship's speakers about 5 o'clock yesterday evening as the Pacific Dawn made its way through the Coral Sea on its way back to Brisbane after a week-long cruise around the Pacific. The seas were heavy with a swell of 4 to 5 metres and winds of about 55 kilometres an hour. A crew member reportedly saw the woman fall from the very top deck of the vessel about 40 metres into the water below. The ship immediately stopped and began circling as life rings were thrown into the sea. The search continued through the night until about 7 this morning when the captain made an announcement.
Good morning, everyone. This is the captain speaking from the bridge. I have an update on our search and rescue mission overnight for one of our guests that fell over the side yesterday afternoon. It is with a very heavy heart that I need to let you know that we have been unable to locate our guest.
The captain said the decision to end the search was made after experts said the woman would not have survived that long in the conditions.
We have now made the extremely difficult decision to continue our journey towards Brisbane. We have made this decision after seeking advice from the marine rescue authorities, both in New Caledonia and Australia. I know I speak on behalf of all of you in saying that our thoughts and prayers are with the family.
Some passengers have reported that the woman was feeling seasick and was knocked overboard by a freak wave. Others report her fall was witnessed by her husband and children. But in a statement, P&O has urged caution, saying so far the cause of the tragedy had not been verified. Passengers on the Pacific Dawn's sister ship, which was in the same area the day before, says conditions were on the rough side.
Conditions were choppy for a while, yeah. Not too bad, not too severe, but they certainly were choppy. We had people on board the ship who had seasickness.
Yeah, it's awful for the family and everyone on board that ship.
The woman's age and nationality have not yet been released. The ship is due to dock in Brisbane tomorrow and an investigation will be launched by Queensland Police. The death will also be referred to the coroner. For Checkpoint, ko Elizabeth Brown tēnei.
Let's go back to the Commonwealth Games. The Silver Ferns will have to beat gold medal favourites Australia tomorrow to continue their record of appearing in every final of the Commonwealth Games they've been at. But as Bridget Tunnicliffe reports, current form suggests that's a big ask.
Since netball was introduced into the Games program in 1998, defending champions Australia have picked up 3 golds and New Zealand the other 2. But that duopoly will be snapped in tomorrow's semi-final because a stuttering New Zealand finished runners-up to Pool B winners England and only advanced to the last 4 thanks to a superior goal difference to Uganda. Speaking to the media today, Australian mid-quarter Kim Revillion admits it feels strange to be playing the Ferns in the semi-finals, but she refused to write them off.
I think, they'd be feeling it a little bit after their last few games, but I think, like I said, they're just going to bring their A game for us, and like I said, it's just going to be a really tough contest and I can't wait for it.
The signs are ominous for New Zealand. The Silver Ferns lost to Jamaica twice at home recently, and 2 days ago Australia beat Jamaica by 21 goals. Australian journalist Greg Davis has been covering netball for the Courier Mail for the past 3 years. Davis says while the Silver Ferns' struggles on the Gold Coast have surprised some Australian netball fans, others have seen it coming.
So I think Joe Public might be surprised, but those within netball maybe saw that the 2-horse race was expanding to a 3 or 4 horse race. So, a little bit of a shock, but I think the struggles, the Jamaica games were really poignant, I think, and pointed to what might have happened here.
He says the splitting of the Trans-Tasman competition could have been detrimental to the Silver Ferns.
Australia's benefited from the Super Netball competition having a lot of internationals coming in. I think the competition splitting in the two parts it might have hurt New Zealand, and I think the likes of your Laura Langman, who's a superstar last year for the Sunshine Coast Lightning, not having her available has really hurt New Zealand because she's a warrior.
The Silver Ferns assistant coach Yvette McCaulson-Jury says despite the hard times, the morale in the team is actually pretty good. She says they've got nothing to lose now.
Because it's going to be a really tough challenge, and every time you play Australia it is, but to win a gold medal in the Commonwealth Games, we're going to have to beat Australia, so this is our opportunity.
With the Silver Ferns under the microscope back home, Australian Diamonds player Liz Watson says if anything, they expect them to be fired up.
Yeah, I guess, it is a final. No matter what's happened, you're at the Commonwealth Games, you're competing in a final, you're gonna do everything for your country, and I expect the Silver Ferns to be doing just that.
In the likely scenario that the Silver Ferns lose to Australia, they are by no way guaranteed bronze. They would then have to meet either Jamaica or England, and recent results suggest the Ferns could come home empty-handed. From the Gold Coast, Bridget Tunnicliffe.
Oh yes, it's a big game. Also ahead, Eliza McCartney in the pole vault. And Dame Valerie Adams, of course, whose first shot was so magnificent that it was a metre clear of the field. She only had to throw one. And she wandered back and put her feet up. Quite an extraordinary athlete. If she wins the shot put, and she is the hot favourite to do so, it will be her 4th consecutive gold medal over 16 years at the Games.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina bat in aho. Gold medalist mountain biker Sam Gaze says he's learnt a tough lesson after being criticised and fined for his abuse of fellow New Zealander Anton Cooper at the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games. Cooper passed Gaze while he dealt with a puncture while leading into the last lap of yesterday's race. However, Gaze produced a sterling ride to take back the gold medal position. After the race, Gaze accused Cooper of being a poor sport for not stopping to help. Gaze says he's apologised to Cooper unreservedly and says he deeply regrets his comments.
It's something I've had to face up to, and it's a great life lesson of, what I need to do being a 22-year-old growing up in this world. And I'm not talking about, going an inch faster on the bike. I'm talking about being a man, and that's what I had to, this is what I'm having to learn.
And Sam Gaze has been fined $280 by Cycling International's governing body for an abusive gesture he made at Cooper after being passed in the race. Jerem Tom's family says he'll be remembered not as the man shot dead by the police, but as the jokester and incredibly generous man. The police say the Auckland man threatened officers with a machete before they opened fire north of Puhoi last month. Sally Murphy reports.
Jerem Tom's family called the police to do a welfare check on him after they had concerns for his mental health. The 29-year-old had been hospitalised 5 weeks earlier and treated for bipolar disorder. They're questioning why upwards of 12 shots were fired at Mr. Tom's. The police say they cannot comment on the shooting due to ongoing investigations. Their mental health team manager, Senior Sergeant Matthew Morris, says mental health training is currently being refreshed. This is Sally Murphy.
New Zealand's Trade Minister says it's hard to know how to view the prospect of the United States considering joining the revised TPP trade deal. Lawmakers there say the President Donald Trump has asked his top trade officials to investigate. Senators and governors have suggested to him that one way to get China's attention would be to do more business with the other nations in the Asia-Pacific region. The Trade Minister David Parker says the US is one of the superpowers, so its comments are of interest.
How real this proposed engagement is, we don't know. Some of the things were said at Davos. The American system is very complex and the administration has many parts, and not all parts of them have the same view, so we're not sure where this ends.
David Parker says New Zealand is aiming to ratify the revised TPP trade deal by the end of the year. Vector says some of the 9,000 Auckland homes entering their 4th night without power after this week's storms may not have services restored until Wednesday. The company's chief executive, Simon Mackenzie, has told Checkpoint that of the 180,000 customers who lost power on Tuesday, about 9,000 are still waiting to have services restored.
Unfortunately, those customers are predominantly out in the west of Auckland, so the areas that really bore the brunt of the weather event. They saw, probably winds up to 200 km as we've seen, and they're in the high vegetation areas, so that is really the tough area for us to get back on.
Simon Mackenzie says most households will have power restored over the weekend, but some may have to wait until Tuesday or Wednesday. The search for a woman who went overboard from a P&O cruise ship in the Coral Sea between Brisbane and New Caledonia has been called off. She was seen falling off the top deck of the Pacific Dawn yesterday, the ABC's Gail Burke reports.
P&O says the Pacific Dawn has continued to search throughout the night for the female guest who was seen to fall overboard late yesterday afternoon about 300 kilometres west of New Caledonia. The ship was returning to Brisbane after a week-long cruise of the South Pacific. Expert advice suggests hopes of survival in the prevailing sea conditions would have diminished significantly during the night. Carnival Australia says the cruise line's thoughts and prayers are with the missing guest's family at this distressing time.
Gail Burke. Firefighters will monitor a fire on a ship in Timaru Harbour throughout the weekend. The fire broke out on Monday night and crews have been working to fully extinguish it since. Fire and Emergency New Zealand's area manager for South Canterbury, Stephen Greenier, says today about 20 firefighters have been working to starve the 2 remaining fires of oxygen, sealing up any portholes or gaps. One is in the cargo hold while another was in the bow of the boat. Mr Greenier says the crew is getting on top of things and it's hoped it will be completely out by Monday. A thermal imaging camera will be used to track the fire throughout the weekend. It's 6:05. Sport and mountain bike silver medalist Anton Cooper hopes gold medalist and fellow Kiwi Sam Gaze has learnt from the fallout of their 1-2 finish at the Commonwealth Games. Gaze labelled Cooper unsportsmanlike for not waiting for him when he suffered a puncture late in the race. He's since apologised and Cooper says he's prepared to give his countrymen the benefit of the doubt.
You don't want it to happen too often because it kind of will show someone's true colours, but, you know, let's hope his apology is sincere, and like I said, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that it is. The problem is if it starts happening too often, then, you know, it's not, but I'm sure he'll have learnt the lesson.
Anton Cooper. Meanwhile, the 2016 Olympic silver medalist Natalie Rooney has surprisingly failed to qualify for the top 6 trap shooting final at the Games. Later tonight, the champion New Zealand shot putter Dame Valerie Adams and pole vault star Eliza McCartney are favoured for gold in their respective finals. Adams is chasing a 4th successive Commonwealth Games title from 10:40 tonight, while 2016 Olympic bronze medalist McCartney is competing in her final from 9:25. 21-year-old McCartney says she's excited by the challenge of being the favourite.
I've always been the underdog in competitions, which I'm very comfortable at. So this is such a good opportunity for me to learn to be comfortable with being one of the top people in the competition, and I've got to learn to do that at some point if I want to be on top.
Eliza McCartney. And the Chiefs assistant coach Neil Barnes is heaping praise on the Hurricanes ahead of the Super Rugby clash in Wellington tonight. The winner of the match, which kicks off at 7:35, will claim top spot in the New Zealand Conference. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, social investor Joel Solomon on the clean money revolution. No laundering required. Kurdish academic and poet Shulman Hadi has returned to the place where Saddam Hussein committed genocide against her people. And influential jeweller Otto Kunstli has spent his career questioning what jewellery is. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 here on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, a few showers mainly tomorrow. Auckland to Waitomo, including Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Scattered showers turning to rain this evening with heavy falls and thunderstorms easing from the south later tomorrow. Taranaki to Manawatu, including the central high country. Scattered rain spreading east this afternoon or evening, clearing from the south tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloud increasing tonight and scattered showers developing overnight. Horowhenua to Wellington also Waiata Upper, fine apart from cloud morning and night. Nelson and Marlborough, high cloud today, cloudy periods tomorrow with isolated showers. Bulla, mostly cloudy with a few showers today. Westland and Fiordland, fine with variable high cloud. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, long fine spells, however isolated showers mainly about the coast. And the Chatham Islands, rain turning to showers this afternoon, some heavy with hail. It's exactly 8 minutes past 6 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten. Have a fantastic weekend.
I will. You too.
What are you going to do?
Oh, well, funnily enough you ask, on Sunday I'm having a tour of the Civic Theatre.
Lovely.
Yeah.
What a grand old lady she is.
Yeah, and I love the Civic, so
yeah
I'm the back, you know, back stuff at the Civic. So I'm
I look forward to hearing about it.
Yeah.
Enjoy it. Thanks, Katrina. Aucklanders could be waiting weeks to have broken roofs fixed and fallen trees cleared as the storm cleanup continues. Vector says 9,000 homes are still without power, and for those living in rural areas, particularly along the west coast, they could remain in the dark until mid next week. And it's not just the dark. A lot of those people are on tank water and they need electricity to get it. Jessie Chang reports.
Branch after branch with all its greenery are fed into the chipper, which turns them to mulch. Alex Neal and his crew from DS Tree Limited are working to clear the carnage that a 5-metre tall tree caused when it was uprooted on Tuesday night. It took out 2 other trees as it came down, and Mr Neal says that's a common sight.
Most of them have been quite like this, really. They've just been sort of caught up, some on houses, some on sort of garden sheds and things. You know, it's just the main thing for us is just sort of getting around to all the sort of the unsafe sites for customers and just making them as safe as we can for them and getting it cleared up for them as quickly as we can.
Jess McVicker, the manager of the company, says they've been flooded with jobs since Tuesday night's storm. She says she's had to bring in extra crews and cancel all the work they had already booked this week to take on new requests. Ms McVicker says her partner, who has owned the company for 13 years, says he's never seen damage like this.
His phone was just absolute chaos. We're getting phone calls from 5:30 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night at the moment. He's never had it like this before.
Ryan Kneebone, the general manager of Treefellers, agreed.
I think that by the end of next week we would have got through most of the emergency stuff. You know, trees on houses, trees on cars, trees through fences.
But he says less immediate jobs could take up to a month before they can be dealt with. Meanwhile, roofing companies say they've been so overwhelmed they've had to stop taking new jobs. Tali Taki from Auckland Roofing says the company has received more than 100 calls for jobs since the storm.
I feel sorry for clients that ring up. We might be the 5th company who've called. We might be the 1st, but we know that they'll be calling 5 more, just desperately trying to get someone out. No one can cope with this level of requests. So I know of 2 other roofing companies at least that have definitely had the same amount, if not more, requests than us.
Mr Taki says it's going to take at least a week and a half before the company will be able to take on new jobs. Vector says 9,000 homes are still without power, and it says those living out west could be waiting until mid next week before the power comes back on. Its chief executive Simon McKenzie says the damage there has been extensive.
We have network running through a lot of those areas which goes through bush or trees are in close proximity, and those areas have had multiple trees uprooted and limbs from trees come down over the lines and basically rip the network down.
Simon McKenzie says 2,500 kilometres of network in that area have been affected. Auckland Emergency Management says it's been delivering portaloos and water where needed, and it has some accommodation available. For Checkpoint, call Jessie Chang TNA.
Oh, I said 16 years for Dame Val. Of course, Glenn points out mathematically, you're quite right, John. I think you'll find 12 years going for 4th medal, 2006, 10, 14 and 18. But what stage she started thinking about it in 2002, Glenn? So she started planning in 2002, but you're right. She is quite remarkable, Dame Val. Let's stay with the Commonwealth Games. A stoush between the Kiwi gold and silver medalists has overshadowed New Zealand mountain bikers, taking out 3 of the top 4 spots in the Commonwealth Games and 2 of the top 3, of course. Tokoroa-born Sam Gaze won gold after suffering a puncture on the last lap of the race. He still managed to come back and beat Cantabrian Anton Cooper, who had overtaken him while he pulled over to get the puncture fixed. As Nita Blake-Person reports, Gaze's attitude and actions after the race, and actually during that bit when Cooper went past him and he lifted one finger in his general direction, have soured what was an impressive win, and he's now been fined 200 Swiss francs by the UCI, the World Cycling Governing Body.
Gaze is proving to be so strong. He had to settle for silver in Glasgow 4 years ago, but he'll finish top of the podium now. Anton Cooper only just behind him, clocks the same time.
It was a remarkable comeback that led to Gaze's gold medal, but a photo of him giving the fingers and appearing to swear at Anton Cooper as Cooper sped past is the story everyone's talking about. After medals were presented and Gaze and Cooper posed for several tense-looking photos, Gaze told reporters Cooper was a poor sport for not stopping to help. But Cooper says mountain biking isn't like road racing, where competitors often pull over or sit up if their leader has mechanical troubles. And he wanted to make the most of the opportunity.
If you have a puncture in a mountain bike race, it's a personal error. If you slip a pedal, or if your gears slip, that's often a personal rider error. So that's part of mountain biking. It's not road racing. We get on and we crack on.
Gaze's comments have earned him no praise with fans on the Gold Coast.
Yeah, everyone's focusing on the negatives afterwards, on the reaction, and compared to what should be on the big, impressive comeback.
No, God, it's a race. If you can go for the gold medal, go for it.
No, I think there's a bit of bad blood there or something.
It does seem against what we normally kind of go for as a Kiwi nation, and you'd think you just get on with it and put his best effort in and get back.
Well, I think that it's not poor sportsmanship, because you've got to do what you've got to do to win. You just keep bloody going.
New Zealander Kashi Loix competed at 3 Olympic Games and 2 Commonwealth Games in mountain biking. He says there was absolutely no obligation for Cooper to stop.
If you have a mechanical, no one ever stops in a mountain bike race, of course, anyone else. You wouldn't even see that in a road race at the end of a road race. And road racing's got much more etiquette like that than mountain biking. Mountain biking, you're in it for yourself. I mean, there was no need for teamwork anymore for New Zealand. If Sam had a mechanical and Anton stopped for him, that South African kid would have won the race.
He says the pair regularly race together, so tension is expected, but Gaze's behaviour isn't acceptable etiquette.
Sam just done the biggest victory of any New Zealander ever last 2 weekends ago, and I put it miles ahead of his Commonwealth Games victory by winning a World Cup. What does he need to worry about this? If he lost the Commonwealth Games, it's still not worth it being like that to anybody, I would say.
Sam Gaze later released a statement apologising for his behaviour, saying he thought his dream was over when his bike had trouble. He said he was embarrassed about how he acted and apologised to Cooper and would work to make sure his actions didn't happen again. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Nita Blake person, aho.
Just receiving texts from people saying fresh power cuts in Titirangi, which is West Auckland, and that has been hard hit. And someone saying about Vector and its updates, hey, just be honest, if it's going to take 4 days to get the power back on, tell us that from day one. So frustrating being told one day and then the next day and the next day, and it's still being drawn out. Thank you for your feedback on the text 2101. A large group of nurses rallied outside Christchurch's hospital today to protest a lack of investment in healthcare. A proposed pay deal was rejected last month by 27,000 nurses and midwives employed by district health boards. And the nurses' organisation is now organising rallies all over the country. But not everyone in the union is happy with how it's handling the ongoing negotiations. Here's Logan Church.
That's the sound of 100 nurses who have come out on their lunch breaks or day off to protest pay and lack of resources. Among them is Karen Marshall, a clinical nurse specialist who works in the spine unit at Bearwood Hospital. She says the strain of an underfunded health system is felt keenly by Christchurch's nurses.
Nurses are tired, they're fatigued. Some of them are going home crying. I see nurses, because I work across sites, that have had enough. They don't want to continue nursing because of the way they're feeling. And it's very evident on social media that some of them are feeling that way.
The New Zealand Nurses Organisation has been embroiled in a bitter pay dispute with the country's district health boards. After pay talks fell over last month, rallies like this one are being held all over New Zealand. Karen Marshall says the nursing profession, which is the backbone of most hospitals, is losing its most experienced staff.
And those are the ones that we need to keep in the nursing profession, because they love teaching. They're our resource for teaching our new nurses, and it's attracting those from high school into the nursing profession as well. And if we aren't well remunerated for that, we're going to lose that skill. So health does need nursing, and we need to be recognised and valued for the skills and the care that we provide.
Cheryl Hannam from the Nurses Organisation says these problems result in an unsafe environment for staff.
It's about safe staffing, it's about numbers, it's about making sure that we have good staff to patient ratios, it's about being able to cover sickness and injuries and things like that to people, especially our nursing colleagues. Over the last wee while, certainly in the mental health system, there's been a lot of media about injuries to staff over there, and it is just about making sure that everyone has the right to go to work and be safe, and this is what it's about, safe staffing, the right to go to work, not be in fear.
In a bid to try and move negotiations along, A panel is being established that will have a representative from the nurses' organisation, the health board and an independent chairperson. However, this has faced some backlash from nurses within the union, with some taking to Facebook with their concerns about a lack of consultation.
No idea who they spoke to, as the general feeling that I have observed was a resounding no to the panel option.
I'm really pissed. This is going to take at least another 6 weeks with no guarantee of a suitable outcome. So sick of delay tactics.
The independent panel will not prevent us moving forward with what we are already doing. It is an aside to our actual negotiations.
The nurses' organisation rejects this. Its Industrial Services Manager, C. Payne, doesn't think the panel will delay any potential settlement.
The panel's work is going to be pretty timely and pretty quick. That's another principle that we had, and our view is it will be constituted and be at a point to make a final recommendation within 3 to 4 weeks.
The union is planning to meet next week about proposed industrial action. The Canterbury District Health Board had no comment on today's protest. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Logan Church.
And just a note on that panel mention in Logan's story, former Labour Minister Professor Margaret Wilson, who was Speaker, wasn't she, has been named as the chair of the independent panel set up to resolve the impasse over nurses' pay. We mentioned that there were fresh power cuts and power outages or cuts in Titirangi, which is West Auckland. We've just heard from Colin in the neighbouring suburb of Langholm, same power out there as well. And nearer to the city, well, I guess slightly north, is Henderson. Power out on Lincoln Road as well. Well, Lincoln is a main arterial from the motorway across to the western suburbs. If you are in those areas and your power has just gone out, do text us 2101, but that's quite major power dropping out, according to you anyway, our listeners who are texting in. So we now think Langholm, Henderson, Lincoln Road and Titirangi are all having issues in the last 10 or 15 minutes. We'll try and confirm that. We're making calls on that now. There is an outage map up on the screen and there are large areas of the west still out. 9,000 homes in total, although it looks like that total is rising. A New Plymouth Girls High School student has launched a petition to be allowed to take her Year 11 girlfriend to the school ball. More than 4,000 people have signed the petition so far, including Ashley's mum, who says she supports her daughter 100%. But while 17-year-old Ashley thinks it's a decision that discriminates against a same-sex relationship with her 15-year-old girlfriend, the school's principal says it's not. Earlier today, just before afternoon assembly, I asked New Plymouth Girls High Principal Victoria Kerr why Ashley can't take her girlfriend to the school ball.
Our ball is a Year 13 event for our Year 13 students, and it's organised by our Year 13 students. So the fact that this student in particular wanted to bring a Year 11 student who attends our school, sorry, I've got everything beeping at me. That makes it really, really difficult. So it's not about bringing a girlfriend. It's about bringing a Year 11 to a Year 13 event. So that was the decision around it.
So will only Year 13 people, presumably Year 13s from outside the school, be welcome?
Yes. So our Year 13 students have been told that it's a Year 13 event and they can bring Year 13. If they wanted to bring anybody older or younger, then they had to ask permission. Occasionally in the past, we've had Year 12 students from other schools that have been allowed to attend, but that's been on a case-by-case basis. We've never had, as far as I'm aware, a Year 11 student attending because it is a Year 13 event.
Okay, and so on the case-by-case basis, in which Year 12 students have attended from other schools, have they always been boys?
Not that I've been aware of, no.
Okay.
It's not a gender issue, it's just the age and we wouldn't have a Year 12 student from our school attending either because it's a Year 13 event and the Year 13s really look forward to it. Because it's a celebration and a reward for their achievement in attending school for 5 years. And, for them, it's a huge thing. They really look forward to it. It's a great event. And, they like the fact that it's a Year 13 event. So we keep that special to them. And as I say, it's a student-organised event. We go, obviously, to support them and we help them with it, but they organise the whole thing.
Do girls bring girlfriends to the ball?
Yes. Yeah.
And the school doesn't have an issue with that?
No, not at all.
Because under the Human Rights Act, you can't have an issue with that, can you?
Whether it's the Human Rights Act or the fact that it's, it's not our concern who they choose to bring as their partners. It's about the Year 13 event being attended by Year 13. So if they want to bring a girlfriend or a boyfriend, then they can do, and some go as friends. But the friends that they bring are also Year 13.
Sometimes when you're in Year 13, of course, you have partners who have already left school, who are older than you. That's actually quite common at that age, isn't it? Are they welcome?
Yes, it is. Yes, but again, we would expect that to be within a reasonable age range, because it is an event for 17, 18-year-olds. So, again, that would be on a case-by-case basis. If we thought it was inappropriate, then we might say no. But we have had girls that have left us that have returned to accompany others, and, boys that are 19 or 20 that have come along as partners to the event. So, yes, that's absolutely fine. And yes, love is really important to have in our lives, but there are all sorts of other occasions that students can share and young adults can share with their loved ones. This event is a Year 13 event, and, we keep it special for our Year 13s.
Victoria Kerr, who is the principal, boy, oh boy, we're hearing from people across a huge area of West Auckland. So power is out in Glen Eden, this person says, Titirangi, we've already said that, Langholm, Henderson, Lincoln Road. Someone says all the way out to Huia, which is way out on the coast, Cornwallis, more Titirangi, more Henderson. So it does seem, and these are new power outages, so something seems to be going on. We are making calls to Vector trying to find out what is happening, but it looks like in the last 10 or 15 minutes there have been major outages in the west. This from Pip. I live in Waitakere Township and I'm feeling broken. Listening to the CEO of Vector is ridiculous. Dropping the bombshell of power as late as Tuesday, Wednesday is not what Vector has been saying to the affected people of Waitakere, Bethel's Beach, Taupaki, Muriwai, Swanson, Helensville. I'm on those community Facebook pages and people are upset. The communication has been atrocious. They refuse to give us any time frame other than what is on their app, which states 10 p.m. tomorrow night. They keep pushing out the restoration time frame, so a lot of people on the community pages have said they've lost their freezer food due to defrosting as they haven't prepared for longer time frames. We've just ordered a portaloo and water an hour ago, but are still waiting for someone to clarify when that will be. There is so much talk on the pages that the rural areas have been forgotten and that we're not as important as the burbs of North Shore and West Auckland. And with your news updates constantly referring to Piha, we feel completely forgotten. North West Auckland was hard hit and we need help, says Pip. And it looks like it's been even harder hit in the past few minutes. Well, some of the power that was back on has gone off again. Let's go back to the Commonwealth Games. Gosh, we've been there a lot. Our excellent team on the ground, from working the Hamilton Beat to working the ring on the Gold Coast. New Zealand wrestler and police officer Toby Fitzpatrick says he'll take no prisoners, at the Commonwealth Games. The 30-year-old is competing at his first Games in the 86 kilo category tomorrow night, and as Joe Porter found out, a late night procrastinating inspired him to chase his dream.
4 years ago, during the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, Toby Fitzpatrick was at Police College in Porirua. But instead of studying one night, the 30-year-old, who's wrestled most of his life, decided to turn on the telly.
I was actually at Police College when it was the last Commonwealth Games, and I remember sitting up when I was supposed to be studying, but I stayed up and watched the wrestling instead, and the New Zealand team did really well. They achieved really highly, and I thought, well, shoot, these are guys I used to train with and compete with back in the day. Maybe this is something I can do. So I sort of made the decision. I'm going to switch back to wrestling full-time, concentrate on that, with the end goal of being here today.
With that end goal achieved, Constable Fitzpatrick is ready to use the skills he's developed as an officer to his advantage on the mat. He says having to deal with pressure situations in the police will help him handle the pressure of competing at his first Commonwealth Games.
There's a lot of pressure, like with wrestling, you're the only one on the mat, you know, it's you standing out there in the middle of the crowd, mano a mano, may the best wrestler win, you know, and so yeah, the mental aspect's huge.
And that mental strength he's gained from wrestling proves invaluable in his work life as he tries his best to defuse situations without getting physical.
The best tool of a police officer is his mouth, you know, like we talk our way out of it. And look, I get beat up every day in training. I don't need to go get into any more fights, I'll tell you that much.
Though sometimes he can't avoid it, and while reluctant to go into detail, he says his wrestling wares have come in handy more than once.
It's the sort of job where anything can happen at any time. I don't want to give away too much, but look, shit happens.
And he says the parallels between wrestling and police work are aplenty.
Wrestling's very much the same, you know, there's a lot going on. I've got to react to what the other guy's doing. I've got to make decisions on how I'm going to overcome the obstacles he's presenting to me and, yeah, just try and get a good result.
And while he has to watch what he eats to make weight, he has indulged in one of the athlete's village most famous delicacies, though avoiding another is proving a real wrestle.
Yeah, hey, look, I did eat a kangaroo pie, I'm not going to lie, and it was delicious. But I'm not too bad. I've got a little bit left to lose, but with the intensity of the training over here, I've got no concerns that'll be an issue for me.
Just stay away from the ice cream store. I hear they're bloody delicious in the village.
Yeah, I know, right? I've got to walk right past it to get back to my room, but hey, look, I'll get my turn after my competition, don't worry.
No doubt a medal would taste better than any ice cream on earth. On the Gold Coast for Checkpoint, Ko Joe Porter Aho.
Joe, you've been doing great work there. Right, we have something from Vector about those outages in the west of Auckland. A nearby substation has become overloaded as Vector got more people reconnected who were affected by the storm. Vector says the problem will be fixed relatively quickly for most people and may take more than half an hour for others. Vector hasn't confirmed where that substation is and how many people are affected by this trip. Thousands are affected. They've just called us, so thousands. Ottatia, Swanson and Henderson, so a big swathe of the west that was back is out again, although not, we are told by Vector, for long. Just a trip as people are reconnected. That's Checkpoint. Have a great weekend. We'll be back on Monday.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Sam Gaze is penitent after apologising for accusing fellow Commonwealth Games team mountain biker Anton Cooper of being a poor sport. The Trade Minister is not sure how to take the US President's calls for a rethink of the American position on the TPP. Vector says some of its 9,000 customers who've been without power since Tuesday's storm may be waiting another 3 or 4 days. Firefighters in Timaru are watching a fire on board a ship in the harbour over the weekend. It's been burning since Monday. And the police in Indonesia have destroyed thousands of bottles of alcohol in a crackdown on deadly bootleg alcohol. Our next news and weather is at 7.
This week on Country Life, a West Coast farmer generates his own electricity from a homemade water wheel.
We built it out of beach, this water wheel, and it's 5 metres